Kia ora everyone. So we're going to show you how to set up your mushroom logs today using your mushroom dowels. So first of all, you're going to need a few things before you start. So I'm just going to quickly go through them. First of all, you're going to need some safety gear, just in case you're going to be using a chainsaw. It's a good idea to obviously have these for your ears, and these also just in case any sawdust is going to fly out. Also, we're going to be doing a bit of drilling today. You're going to need a cordless drill ideally. Doesn't matter if it's got a cord, cordless is easier. And you're going to need either an 8 to 9 mil drill bit or a 10 to 11 mil drill bit, depending on the size of your dowels that you're getting. We're also going to need a hammer, a brush, a wire brush or something similar, because we're going to be potentially, it isn't always the case, but brushing lichen off the log if there is any lichen or stuff on the log that we need to remove to make the outside of the log clean. And we're also going to need a brush and something to put our hot wax in. We've got our hot wax heating up just over here at the moment. I prefer to use beeswax just because it's more eco-friendly than paraffin wax. You can use paraffin wax or soy wax though if you need to. Okay, so now that you've got all these things, you can also use a hand saw, by the way, instead of a chainsaw if you don't have a chainsaw. Okay, so to start with, now that we've got all our stuff together, you're obviously going to need a log. So I'm going to quickly talk about that because it's really important that you get the right type of log, otherwise you're not going to be able to grow mushrooms. What we've got here is pin oak. You can tell an oak tree by the lines running towards the centre of the heartwood on it. It's really awesome wood to work with. It lasts a really long time, but there are quite a few different types of wood that you can use. So any of the oak family are great. Willow, poplar, alder, liquid amber. Some of the gum trees are pretty good. Plane trees can be good as well. That's just a short list at least. Anyway, beech and birch are also good. But yeah, you can look this up online if you want compatibility of the type of mushroom that you want to grow and what types of wood you are wanting to use. So first of all, before you do anything, make sure that you've got a wood which is compatible with the type of mushroom that you're going to try and cultivate. Alright, so next we want to have a look over our log, and by that I mean we want to see how clean the log is. We want to see how much damage there is on the bark. The bark is going to act as a protective layer which is going to stop contamination entering into the wood, which is what the mushroom mycelium is going to be growing in to give us our mushrooms in about a year's time or so. So if we have a look at this log here, there's a few things going on. This was just cut down a couple of days ago, so it's relatively fresh. Ideally you want to be doing this 2 weeks after a tree has been cut down. So we won't use this log today. We're going to use another log instead. Of course you don't want to leave the log too long either, or it can start to contaminate with other types of weed fungi, which are going to create competition in the wood, and then when you go to inoculate it you may not get the results that you desire. So generally I aim for between 2 weeks and 2 months as my time frame to inoculate logs within. I'm going to use this log to show you a few things that are good and not so good. So for a start, it's a pretty fresh log, so that's great. It's a nice chunky piece of wood. You can't see any blemishes in any of the wood, which means there's no contamination in it. But there are a few things, if I turn it around, going on here. So we've got this bit of ripped out bark here. This isn't really that desirable. This is going to be a really good entry for contamination. There's also a crack in the bark here as well, if you can see that. Again, it's another place that contamination can get into the log, which isn't ideal. So you want to be selective in the logs that you use to do this with. If you don't know where to get your wood from, if you can't source it yourself, you can talk to your local arborists. It's a good place to go. This is where this has come from. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a few bits on the side, so like this guy here, and there's another one down here. The less of this, the better. It's okay, we can cover this with wax, but we're going to want to clean this up if we're going to use this log, and we'd take it to that and clean it up, and also clean up the ends as well. So we're not going to use this log today, but it was just as a reference to show you what's good about a log and what's not so good. So I hope that helps. We'll get on to the next part, which is cleaning the log up. Okay, so we're going to start cleaning our log up. This log here is a couple of weeks old. It's again pin oak, and this guy is really clean. You can see there's not really any damage in the bark. The ends are nice and clean, the bark's intact, there's no cracks or anything. There is a bit of lichen on here, and so we're going to take this lichen off quickly. I've got a wire brush with me here. We're just going to take this off. You can also use a water blaster if you've got a water blaster handy. If you're doing quite a few logs, it's quite an effective way to get rid of this lichen. Okay, so we've just tidied the log up a bit there. As you can see, it's not completely perfect, but you just want to get the bulk of it off. The reason that we take the lichen off is because when we drill our holes, if little bits of the lichen fall into the hole, that can cause contamination in our log. We want to try and keep a relatively clean practice here when we're doing this to get the best results. Alright, so before we go any further, we're going to get a chainsaw now and we're going to cut the ends off. Okay, so we've cleaned up our log now. We've got all the lichen off it, if there's lichen that you need to clean off, and we've cleaned up the ends of the logs too, so there's no contamination on the wood on the ends of it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start drilling holes through the bark to put our dowels in to inoculate our log. So a little tip for you all at home, just to make this a little bit easier, is grab one of your dowels, place it, make sure you've got the right size drill bit for a start. So these are 8mm dowels that I've got here. We also have 10mm ones as well. Predominantly they're 8mm, but find the drill bit that is right for this. So you want it to be a snug fit in the hole. So we've got a 9mm drill bit here. The dowels swell a little bit when we soak them in water, boil them, and then inoculate them with the culture that we want. So you want to get your dowel and put it up against your drill bit, and you're going to wrap a piece of tape around. You can see the black bit of tape that I've got on there, and that's just going to be a depth gauge for when you're drilling your holes. You want to be just ever so slightly deeper than the length of your dowel. So we're going to drill these holes now and get this ready to put these dowels in. Okay, so I've just drilled a couple of rows of holes here, as you can see. And just a couple of tips for you. I generally drill my holes about 10 to 15 centimeters apart, roughly 15 centimeters, or a hand span. And so depending on the thickness of your log will determine how many rows of dowels you want to put in. So for this log I'm going to do 4. And I'm going to offset them as I go around. So I'll go around a quarter of a turn and then I'm going to go in between my last row. So I've got 5 in my first row, so I'll have 4 in my next row, then I'll have 5 again here, and then another 4 in my next row. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to put the dowels in. Okay, so we're going to start putting the dowels in now. We're using today Aotearoa New Zealand shiitake. So we're going to start by putting these guys in. And you should get them nice and flush with the bark. Now that we've got all our dowels hammered in, we're going to go ahead and use our beeswax to seal the log. You don't need much, you just need a small amount to cover each dowel over. So we're going to go around the whole log and do every one. We've gone around and we've sealed all of the dowels over. So the only thing that remains to be done is sealing the ends on this log here. We need to get all that wood covered up. It's going to do two things. One, it's going to keep contamination from being able to enter the wood on the ends of the log, and it's also going to keep the moisture in, which is going to give the mushroom culture that we're inoculating the log with much better environment to be able to grow in. Also on top of this, you're going to just want to check your log. This is a pretty awesome log. There's no damage in the bark, there's no side branches that we have to clean up, no wood exposed that we might have to drill into or cut a little bit out with a chainsaw and then seal with any wax. But this is the time to also do that as well if you need to, just to make sure that there's no wood that's going to have any contamination in it. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly seal the ends of this log. Just make sure your wax is nice and hot when you're doing this part, otherwise it's quite easy for it to peel off if the wax gets too cool. It's just a bit thicker and it seems to peel away a lot easier if that's the case, so make sure it's nice and hot when you're applying it. So that's one side, we'll turn over and do the other side. Okay, so now that we've got our log finished, we've got both our ends sealed there, and all our dowels are nice and sealed over with that beeswax as well. We're going to need to try and find somewhere for this to go in our garden or around the back of our house out of the sun. Basically the idea is you want to try and keep this somewhere where the evaporation is going to stay as low as possible. Ideally it's a moist environment that you're putting your log in, slightly up off the ground, is to not create any excess contamination. So what you can do is we can use some bricks and we can place it under a tree, or we can put it on the south side of the house, raised up on something as well. You can also use a fencing staple and put one of them through the end, and using a piece of rope or number 8 wire you can hang it off something. Just keep in mind the higher that the log is up off the ground, the more evaporation is going to occur. So you're just going to have to look around your property and find the best place. So we're going to go find a place now to put this log, and we'll talk a little bit about some maintenance. Okay, so we've found a nice place to put our log. We have come under this beautiful loquat tree here. These are an evergreen, so they don't lose their leaves. It's good shelter for the log. It's going to protect it from the extreme cold in winter. It's going to protect it from the extreme hot in summer. And we've got it up off the ground on our bricks here, which is going to stop it from coming into contamination with all of this stuff on the ground underneath it. So now that we've found a good place for it, we want to just keep in mind that we're going to have to check our log every now and then. When you set your log up, you want to take a little mental note of how heavy it is. And every now and then just walk past and pick it up. And if it's starting to feel unusually light, then you probably want to soak it in some fresh water. So if you've got an outdoor bath, or your recycling bin is empty, or some kind of vessel that can hold enough water to soak your log. It doesn't have to be completely submerged either. It will draw water through the grain of the log. So if you've only got a 10 litre bucket or something like that, or a 20 litre bucket, and you can lean the log up against the wall so it doesn't tip over, then you can use something like that. But it's really important that your log stays hydrated. You can overhydrate your log, so I recommend only soaking it 12 hours at a time, checking it, and if you need to re-soak it, then leave it another 12 hours and then soak it again after that until you've got it to a nice weight again. It's going to take about 12 months for your log to start producing for a lot of the mushrooms that you're growing anyway. The oyster mushrooms may come on a little bit faster, but your shiitake, your turkey tail and your tawaka are probably going to take around a year before you start seeing any signs of mushrooms appearing. When you do see your mushrooms appearing, you are going to want to harvest them when they're at their peak, obviously, and then once they're harvested, you want to soak your log because it's going to lose quite a lot of water through the fruiting process and all that water from the log going into the mushrooms. That's really it. You can repeat this process over and over again. Some logs can last 8 to 12 years. Oak is particularly good for as a long-lasting wood. So that's it. You've got your log set up. You're equipped with all the knowledge you need. Good luck everyone, and happy mushroom log growing.